Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Kendall Bauer, and today's topic is Discover Iceland, the land of fire and ice. And today we're going to be hearing from NatHab expedition leader, Lianne Thompson. Lianne, I'm so happy that you're here with us today. I'm going to hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kendall. Yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today as well. I get to talk about Iceland, which I haven't been able to do since last September. So I'm pretty pumped to gush about this itinerary. I've been doing it for a few years now and I absolutely love it. So we'll kind of go through things like our packing list, what to expect, details about the itinerary, and I'll try to cover hopefully all the questions that you have, but as we said, there'll be a question period at the end. So I'll start it off just by kind of more formally introducing myself. So I am Lianne Thompson. I live in Canada, so it does mean that I also run several of our Canadian programs. So we've got, I do our polar bear programs, Northern Lights and Belugas up in Churchill. I've also done the Cotswolds program. I am from England, even if I don't sound like it. Canadian Rockies, those ones are starting soon. That's kind of where my brain is mainly focused at the moment, but I also guide Iceland, where I'll be later on in the year. Lots of different programs and I love them all. It's hard to pick a favorite, but Iceland is certainly really big and up there. So when we talk about Iceland, we describe it as the land of fire and ice. And I hope that this image here is not going to scare you off immediately, like close the laptops and everything. But in order to understand why we describe it as the land of fire and ice, we have to talk about both of those components. And to talk about fire, we do kind of have to do a mini geology lesson. I'm going to try and keep it quick because that's not the focus of this, but we have to understand why Iceland is the way that it is. And so for that, we just need to understand a little bit about the structure of the earth. So we have our inner core, we have our mantle, and we have our crust. Our crust is what we're kind of standing on right now. And our crust consists of different plates. So if you're familiar with the idea of plate tectonics, it's the idea that our mantle, our core, all of the way that these things are interacting affects the earth. So the way that our continents sit right now, it's not how the continents have been sitting since the beginning of Earth. They have moved around. Some people are quite familiar with Pangaea, which is a supercontinent that existed, I believe it was about 180 million years ago. And so that was when all of our plates were smashed together. And then since then is them moving into the configuration that we know now. But we have all of these different tectonic plates that interact, and they can interact in a couple of different ways. But here's a map that kind of shows some of the different tectonic regions. And maybe you'll already be looking at where Iceland is on this map and going and thinking something strange about where that one is. But we've got all of these different plates. Those plates can interact with each other in different ways. So we can have divergent, where we've got two plates of the crust that are moving in opposite directions. We can have convergent, where two plates are smashing into each other. And we can have transform, also called passive, where they're just kind of sliding next to each other. And so one of the things that makes Iceland very unique is that it is sitting on two tectonic plates that we talk about a lot. So we've got our North American plate and we have our Eurasian plate. And these two plates are divergent, meaning they are moving apart. So Iceland itself is actually growing. It grows by about 2.5 centimeters every single year because that is the distance that those plates are slowly moving apart. So quite a fascinating thing, but, and here we can zoom in a little bit more on just Iceland in general. But that ridge, that tectonic plate ridge, which we call the mid-Atlantic ridge, does not just exist at Iceland. If you looked at that tectonic plate map, you could see that there was a whole thing kind of running all the way down the Atlantic Ocean. Kind of almost looks like a baseball seam that's running down there. But why is it that Iceland exists? We've got these ridge lines all over the place, but why is Iceland something that is above land? This mid-Atlantic ridge is several thousand miles long, but Iceland is particularly special. And that is because the second factor, so we've got our first factor, meaning the mid-Atlantic ridge, those divergent plates. The second factor is that Iceland sits above a hot spot, also called a mantle plume. Please don't, I swear it won't last very long. Don't have me lose you here now. Some of you might even be familiar with this and we'll talk about why in just a second, but how a hotspot, or exists, or what the heck that is when we've got our crusts that have converged, right? We talked about that as well, smashing into each other. They don't just smash and stay there. Eventually one goes up and one goes down. So we have one that subducts underneath the other crust. And when that subduction zone happens, parts of that crust can break off because they're colder and denser than the surrounding mantle. It means they'll sink down to the core of the earth. And then when at the core of the earth, we end up with a very concentrated zone of minerals. And that heat and that concentration can shoot a mantle plume right up to Earth. And if this is quite confusing, I like to describe it kind of like a lava lamp. Our Earth is just like a giant lava lamp. So we've got our crust, our mantle, and our core, and these things moving. We've got stuff happening, all of these different convections happening within our mantle. That's what causes the movement of our tectonic plates. So things kind of shifting around like that all of the time. And the idea of a hotspot might not be unique to you. We do have about 36 hotspots worldwide. I cannot name them all, so please don't ask me to do that. But one of the other ones that's quite famous is Hawaii. So people know that Hawaii is very volcanically active itself. There is a hotspot, or this mantle plume, feeding up into Hawaii. But what makes Hawaii different is that it is sitting on a single tectonic plate. So as that tectonic plate moves, that mantle plume staying stationary, that's why we've ended up with the chain of islands of Hawaii. Versus with Iceland, we have a hotspot, but we have to add in that mid-Atlantic ridge, and that is why we end up with one single island that is actively growing. So as I said, it is growing about 2.5 centimeters per year. And it also means that we do have a lot of volcanic activity. And that's why we really need to talk about the core basics. Why is Iceland so volcanically active? And now we know we've got that mantle plume, the hot spot, and we've got the mid-Atlantic ridge. So both of those factors combined making Iceland. It shapes a lot of Iceland. That is the fire that has created Iceland and still continues to shape it. And many people, they're usually quite familiar with the fact that since 2021, we've had continual eruptions. So those are happening along the Reykjanes Peninsula, not far from Keflavik Airport, where you land, just a short drive away from Reykjavik, the city. And we've got continual eruptions. I had to Google this morning just to double check if we still have one going on, because sometimes they erupt and for half an hour they're going off and then you don't hear from them again. Other ones could go on for a week before they're done. Other ones can go on for months. And this is what happened in 2021, the first one of them all. It erupted, and of course it would have its quiet periods, but then it would erupt again and quiet and erupt. But it was going on pretty continuously for several months. At this point, when the eruptions are happening, if one's happening, is quite unpredictable. So people are often asking, are we going to go to the active eruption? And the answer is that we do not include this on our itineraries for several reasons. One is the level of unpredictability. It could be there one night and then it's gone completely the next morning. It could happen for the beginning of the season and be gone by the end, or vice versa. So we just never know if it's going to be actively erupting. Two is that depending on where the eruption has taken place, you might have to hike several miles completely uphill on very rough terrain in order to even access the site. And third, perhaps most importantly, is safety-wise. There's continual changes in the safety regulations of whether you are or are not allowed to go to these eruption sites. So all of those things combined are why we don't include it on our itinerary. If you're hoping to do that, I just recommend coming a few days earlier or staying a few days later to try your luck and see if an eruption is happening and if it's safe to go to and if it's accessible. Then you can certainly try and do that on your own time. If that is happening, there's lots of shuttles, there's tours, there's other things that you can kind of sign up for that. But for the purposes of our tour, we're not going to this active eruption. I'll talk later on about some of the other volcanic spaces that we are going to go and see though. But one thing that might pop into your brain is we've got this volcanically active island that's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in the north. What does the weather look like? It's kind of the big elephant in the room when we talk about Iceland, because you can get all sorts of weather. All four of these pictures kind of depicting very different things. And most of them, you could get all four of these things on one single trip. So we have the wind. being displayed very nicely in our top left, we do have snow. And there are many trips that see snow. Just because you come in the middle of July or late August or early August doesn't mean you won't necessarily see snow. If we're up in the highlands, you can see snow. And it just depends. We see snow regularly on these trips. You can also have beautiful, clear, calm, sunshiny days. I would call those ones a bit more of the anomaly of the weather, but they do exist. We do also get lots of rain and precipitation that happens there. And these things are all really important. I know we go, and I'm like this too. I go on vacation. I'm hoping for the best weather ever. But if we don't have rain in Iceland, Iceland doesn't really look like Iceland. Everything's quite dry. And so we need the rain to have that colorful ecosystem that we know. So the easiest way to prepare for the weather, what's the expression? It's like, we'll weather the weather whether we like it or not. So we'll just be prepared for it. So we talk about our packing list. You'll see one very common word that is listed here several times, and that is waterproof. So first thing on the packing list should be a pair of waterproof hiking boots. But I also recommend to just bring a pair of comfortable shoes as well. My hiking boots are what I'm wearing basically throughout the day, and I'll also have some more casual shoes. I am well known. I live in Canada. I love my sandals. I am well known for wearing my sandals around lots of Iceland, but I do also have a pair of comfortable shoes when neither the hiking shoes or the sandals are appropriate. So having both those, but waterproof hiking boots, super important. Waterproof rain gear. So this does include having a waterproof jacket as well as having waterproof pants. People are often quite familiar with having the jacket, but the pants are equally as important if you're wanting to stay dry, making sure that they are good and waterproof. I've heard guides recommend go put your gear on and stand under the shower and see if you stay dry with it. And it's not a bad suggestion because we can get that much rain in Iceland. We do also suggest layers, layers, and layers. So I will have base layers. I'll have sweaters. I'll have my waterproof on. I'll have my a hat, a pair of gloves. We do bring all of these things. And this is for all parts of the season. I have done this trip for 3 years now. And last September, or last year, no, sorry, 2022, September was actually the best weather of the entire season, whereas in the summertime, it was actually a lot colder and rainier. But sometimes it's the complete opposite. Sometimes the whole time we get lots of rain and lots of storms because that's what Iceland is. But again, if we're prepared for it, we're good to go. We do also recommend having a backpack so that you can then, during the day, you can have extra layers in there. So I'll have an extra sweater in my backpacks in case we go out and my one sweater does get quite wet. You know, wrists get wet when you're taking pictures and whatnot. This way I can just swap for a different sweater. Having a waterproof cover for your backpack is good. We do go on some hikes that we'll talk about in a little bit. And so it just helps to make sure that your backpack is also staying quite dry. Having a day pack is also good because we try to make sure that our luggage, we're not diving into our luggage all the time. It sits at the back of the bus, and if we're needing to pull out our luggage 12 times a day, it eats into all of the time that we have to explore all the amazing beauty of Iceland. So have a good day pack that'll fit some things. Trekking poles is often a thing that people will ask about. We do have trekking poles. If you're a person that knows your trekking poles, loves your trekking poles, wants to have both of your trekking poles with you, they're important to you, especially if you're considering doing hiking beyond the NatHab itinerary. You can certainly bring your own, but as guides, we do have trekking poles that are available, and we'll ask that at the welcome dinner just so we have an understanding of the number that we should have. In your pre-departure briefing, there's a really comprehensive list that you can go through in order to know that you've got all of your packing needed. But one thing I always like to point out is that travel adapter for plugging things in. That one will be super important as they do have the different outlets. All right, we can talk a little bit more about the trip itself. So you will land in Keflavik Airport. There'll be a person there waiting for you to bring in your shuttle. So there'll be a NatHab sign there that'll pick you up from the airport and bring you into the city of Reykjavik. Now, one thing to note is that most of the times, the only flights I've ever taken to get there, they all typically land early in the morning, and the hotel check-in times aren't until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sometimes you can get them a bit earlier, certainly, but I would plan to know that your hotel won't be available till later on that afternoon. So the option that some people take is to book a hotel for the night before, so you can show up and at 8 a.m. when you get into Reykjavik, you know that your hotel room is ready there for you. The other option is that the hotels will store your luggage for you, so you can go drop off your luggage and just motor through that jet lag, unless you manage to get a lot of sleep on the plane, and explore the city of Reykjavik. It is really lovely. It's very accessible. It's very safe. I've spent a lot of time walking around there. There's lots to see and do, so you can also explore that option. And one question that people will often ask a lot about is ATMs, cash, credit cards, all of that kind of stuff. There are some ATMs that you can pull money out, the Icelandic krona being locally. Cash is accepted in many places, and many places will take the US cash, but credit cards are also accepted. If you're a big souvenir shopper, credit cards are really well accepted as well. So this is our map of Iceland. So this is kind of going to give a bit of a brief outline of where it is that we cover on our trip. So we'll watch our stars come in. So we do start in Reykjavik. We head down our south coast, make our way to Vik. We'll follow up the east coast, explore ice, which we'll talk about shortly. We then continue along the road, cut into the highlands, and we spend some time in the highlands. We hang out around Lake Mivat for a little while, and then we head over to Akureyri, where Akureyri is actually where we get our flight that takes us all the way over to the West Fjords, where we'll hang out in Isafjord. So we do cover a lot of land on this itinerary. So of course, naturally, we need to talk about transportation. So the first transportation, which was so lovely displayed there with that flying plane, is our chartered flight. So we do have a chartered flight that will go from Akureyri to Isafjord, and that's just for our group. We then have another domestic but scheduled flight that will go from Isafjord back down to Reykjavik at the end of the trip. So we do have two flights. There are some baggage requirements, so keep an eye, again, looking at that pre-departure briefing to consider your packing list. Because I also note that as we travel around Iceland, you might be thinking, hey, we must stay in a lot of different hotels. And that is exactly correct. And if you bring an enormous bag full of so many clothes, you need to pack and repack those every single day. So I like to do myself a favor and, of course, bring what I need, make sure that I'm going to be comfortable, make sure that I'm going to be warm and dry, but don't overpack. I definitely have a tendency to overpack, so I try to limit what goes on just because it makes it simpler for me. Packing and unpacking double what I need is just not overly fun. So try to be cognizant of what it is that you're bringing just to make your life a little bit easier. So we do have our domestic airlines, or domestic flights, sorry, that we're going to be taking, but we do also have various other modes of transportation. Our top left is our bus, and so that is the vehicle that we will be taking around, driving throughout most of the country, the first little bit, all the way until we got to Akureyri. So it's a nice, comfortable bus, lots of window seats, so everyone will have their window seat. There's a spot next to you for that backpack full of all your waterproofs and your layers and your water and everything, your camera gear, whatever it is that you need. And so we'll have our transportation kind of organized and ready that way. But as we're going around, we do also take some Zodiacs. We'll go out, the top right here is our rib. So we go out on the boat looking for whales. You can see they're all in some really cool matching outfits. It does mean that when we are in times such as when we're whale watching, as well as when we are on the Zodiac doing our glacial lagoon tour, both of those times we do get to wear matching outfits. So that means they're giving you those extra waterproof, warm layers to help you, of course, with your life preservers as well. We do have a few super Jeep days as well. So the bottom left-hand side, this picture does not do it justice. I absolutely need to replace it. But these big, massive super Jeeps, it's something that Iceland is so well known for. Some of these vehicles are even two different vehicles that have been morphed together as one, but they can have a whole bunch of seats in there. They're very comfortable. And those vehicles are also very good for that off-terrain that we'll go do. Get into some of the more technical and difficult areas, but we can go drive through them versus our bus, probably not quite so capable of making that there. We do also have the other larger boat that we'll use, and that takes us, this is one particular for the West Fjords, and this takes us over to kind of a really private area of the West Fjords. One of my favorite days of the itinerary. It is absolutely amazing. So lots of modes of transportation that we're going to be using here. And I alluded to it already, but let's talk about our accommodations. The accommodations that we have here, there are many. And so we don't spend a ton of time in our hotels. We are not there to sit and hang out in a hotel. We're there to experience Iceland. We've got long, busy days, action-packed days, but our accommodations, they are there. They're very comfortable. They'll be warm. They have darkening curtains, which is a very essential component, especially if you're there in the summertime when there's almost 24-hour light. Those things are all very important. But they are quite kind of simplistic. So more of our European style, instead of having tons of pillows and all this lavish stuff, they're just quite basic. And you can kind of see it already displayed in both of these pictures, is that European style beds, they tend to have just single beds, and those single beds can either be put together, and that's how we get one big bed, or spread apart, and now you can have two single beds. So we'll often see two single beds with a mattress cover zipped up kind of the center. It's not uncomfortable, so don't worry. But that's how we get our two beds. But we do typically end up with two different duvet covers, so one per person, and it's just kind of the more European style that we have there. Bathrooms tend to be a little bit smaller. I cannot think if we see a bathtub on this trip. I really was trying to rack my brain to know if I've ever seen a bathtub in Iceland. I know they exist. They're just not very common, so it's the stand-up showers. But all of our accommodations, we do pick them based on location. So we don't want to drive 2 hours out of the way to go stay at some lavish, fancy hotel. Instead, we find ones that are really nice. I'm not saying negative things about our accommodations at all. They are really nice, but they're just kind of more in the path of our journey. So that's kind of the lowdown of our accommodations. Wi-Fi is typically available at all of them, but there are some where I would call it Wi-Fi-ish. So depending on what room it is that you're in, the Wi-Fi might not stretch all the way to that corner, and that becomes kind of particularly enhanced if we're experiencing a nice Icelandic storm. But yes, we do have Wi-Fi at every single location. You'll have that to be able to connect to. If you're wanting to connect and stay connected throughout the day, you can always look at buying just like the SIM cards when you first land at the airport as well. Yeah, so also important to talk about food. If you've come on a NatHab trip, you know we will constantly be feeding you, and that is true in Iceland as well. We have loads and loads of food. For our breakfasts, they tend to be continental breakfasts, which means something very different in Europe than it means in North America, but they aren't the same types of breakfasts. So in the mornings, you'll have yogurt, you'll have bits of fruit, but they also have things like cheeses and meats. They'll have toast, they'll have breads. They are fairly simple, but I have never had a problem with someone going hungry with continental breakfasts. We always find something for you to eat, and it's something that people enjoy. Dietaries will be covered for all of our lunches. We do also have some packed lunches. We can have some picnics. So our bottom left here, kind of more of a picnic style. We'll have sit-down meals. We do also have some set menus. We'll do pre-orders of meals. Sometimes I find the groups come around and I come up standing in front of a piece of paper and people groan at me. They're like, "What meal are we ordering now, Leanne?" And that's definitely reigns true in Iceland. We do a lot of pre-orders, and this is just to help our partners there. That way they're ready for us, and our meal times don't go too lengthy. European meal times, meals are an occasion. People sit down, they want to hang out with each other, and you can sit there for 2 or 3 hours just to eat a dinner. And that is not exactly what we're wanting to do on our trips. We know we've had long, busy, fun, packed full days, and we want to be able to eat and go to bed so that we're nice and rested. And so doing pre-orders and set menus just really, really help with that. One thing to note, Iceland is an island. What's surrounding that island? The ocean. Lots of fish. It means you have plenty of fish that is available on this itinerary. They also are very common for lamb. So lamb and fish, lamb and fish, lamb and fish, lamb and fish. If you like those two things, you are absolutely set for eating on this trip. If you don't like those things, if you are a vegetarian, all of those things, all those dietaries, they will be covered. There'll always be options for you, but lamb and fish are very readily available. So that is kind of a lowdown on our food. Sorry, I'm going to try and make sure I keep on top of my timings here. Also important to talk about Icelandic people. This could be an entire topic, I think, for a webinar. People in Iceland are just the most wonderful humans. They can solve any problem and solve it incredibly quickly. You can see in the bottom right-hand side, you got some mechanical issues. This issue that looks like it could be quite large, solved in about 20 minutes. They are very resourceful. So many of the people are on search and rescue. They volunteer their time. They are proud of their country, as they should be. They are kind, they are nice, they are lovely. I love Iceland people, and I'm so excited to go back and hang out with so many of my friends that I've made there over the years. They are just so much fun. So it's another thing that I just want people to look forward to in terms of going to Iceland. All right, let's get into some more of the itinerary details. One thing that you might have noticed on the itinerary is the word foss, F-O-S-S. If you see foss at the end of a word, it means waterfall. It's your first language lesson for Iceland. You'll get more language lessons typically from Icelandic people, but that is certainly one that I can offer to you. We visit a ton of waterfalls because Iceland has so many stunning, beautiful, beautiful waterfalls. So we do visit lots of them on our way. Too many for me to possibly list. It starts on day one and it basically goes throughout our entire itinerary. And you might think, hey, I could get bored of looking at these waterfalls. Let me tell you, they are all completely spectacular. So you will not get bored. They're all very unique. Sorry, my cat is now going to join me on my webinar. I was hoping he was going to sleep through this thing, but he has not. Here he is. Ice. So we talked about fire, but Iceland is the land of fire and ice. So we have to explore ice as well. We have an entire day that is basically solely devoted to just ice. So this does include going on a glacier hike. So we do get our lovely hard hats you'll see in the bottom left corner, holding the ice picks as well. So we go out and we explore ice. Iceland itself is actually covered in about 11% ice. They have, I've read, the last number I read was 269 named glaciers. I cannot say most of them. If you see them written down, you'll understand completely why it is that I say that I cannot name them, or I cannot pronounce them, sorry. But yeah, we go and explore the glacier in many different ways. So get up into, we don't go all the way to the top, but we'll get into some of these crevasses. Sometimes, depending on the conditions, we can attach to a rope and get not hung down into it, but kind of move down on the rope so we can look much further into some of these moulins and just really explore the features of the ice by physically being on the ice. So this is one of the ones that we talk about in terms of physical capabilities. We do get ice cleats. They're not super obvious. You can kind of see them in the bottom left photo, but we do get ice cleats. And these ice cleats do a remarkable job of keeping you steady on the ice. The hike itself, the hardest part is actually just getting up to the ice. So we have a short walk that's uphill, kind of through some switchbacks. It does not take long, 10, 15 minutes. We definitely move at a pace that makes everyone feel comfortable. So please don't worry about it. And then we get out on the ice, and you might expect the ice to be kind of this angle, but it is relatively flat. Those ice picks, they help. There's also lots of help available. We have an ice guide as well as the expedition leader that's out there. And we get pretty much everyone that wants to go onto this ice, they get a chance to go on this ice. Really, really cool to explore it by foot on top of it. But from there, we then also go into a Zodiac and go into a glacial lagoon. And so the glacial lagoon is also just mind-blowingly incredible. Like, look at all the features that you can see here. It's a completely different experience because part of that glacier is calving off into this lagoon. This picture doesn't really show it, but if you remember all the way back to that first photo I had just as the intro slide, there's all these pieces, massive chunks of ice that are floating around in the lagoon. They're different colors, they're just different shapes, and it's just a really incredible way to see ice. We talk about ice ages affecting Iceland, how the ice is affected by the volcanoes, so much stuff, how ice has shaped the land. Some of the mountains that we see there, they originally had ice on top of them, so when an eruption has happened, it produces something called a table mountain because you just got that glacier got pushing a lot of weight onto that eruption that's happening, makes the top very flat. So there's so much to talk about with ice as to how ice has shaped how ice has shaped Iceland. Hence, one of the names of Iceland here. So we do spend a time in this glacial lagoon. Again, you can see the fancy matching outfits there, helping to keep you nice and warm. When we're in the glacial lagoon as well, it's one of the places where we can see seals. I wouldn't say I see them every single time. We see them some of the time, but if we don't see them here, there are several other opportunities for seeing seals along our way. So the glacial lagoon is not far from the ocean, and sometimes the seals kind of glump their way up into the lagoon and like to hang out there. Year over year, it can just change, but we do have our harbor seals are our most common seal that we'll be seeing in Iceland. They come up, they'll lay out onto the ice floes there. We also commonly see them in the west fjords. They like to come and beach themselves right along the edge of the land. We call them like banana seals, as they sit there and try to clutch onto their rocks and hold on for dear life as that tide moves in and is trying to scoop them out. But they do like to come out. I think they're really good at posing for photos too. You know how you have some animals that you swear you put a camera in front of them and they move their head away? I find seals to be really good at posing for photos. So it is one of our times that we can see our seals. So this is the first wildlife that I'm talking about. We'll talk about a few more throughout the next few slides, kind of interspersed with more of the landscapes and activities. But next one would be to talk about reindeer. That's because the day after we have our ice day. On that drive, we're in an area of the East Fjords, and the East Fjords is the only area that you can actually see reindeer in Iceland. So reindeer, they are not native to Iceland. They were introduced in the 18th century, and when they introduced them, they actually tried in 4 different locations in Iceland, and 3 of the groups just did not hold, versus the East Fjords of Iceland has managed to stay. We see them on some trips, but not all, and that is because they are a migratory species. So they'll come down in the winter time. Actually, if you go in the winter time, is their easiest time to spot. They come down. We go to a little fishing village called Djúpivogur, and people in Djúpivogur will talk about how the reindeer have just been hanging out in their backyards all winter time. But then they go up into the highlands, into this much more sparse but very large area throughout the summertime. So when we come in, sometimes we can see them when they're still down low in the East Fjords. I've seen them down there. That's where this picture has been taken. But I have also driven up into the highlands and seen a whole herd of them, actually, just on the, not on the side of the road, but from the road as we were driving. So really cool species for us to keep an eye out for. This one would be a male. It's got that very large rack of antlers. You can tell the time of year, not only because of there's no snow on the ground, but also those antlers covered in velvet. So we know that those antlers are actually still actively growing. They'll shed that velvet later on, and then we get kind of the more typical white rack it is that we're used to seeing. But we can see herds. Sometimes we just see individuals. Sometimes we see them as groups. It just kind of depends. But it is only in the East Fjords of Iceland that we are able to look for them. So as we've done that drive now, we've come up into the highlands for our spotting time of the reindeer, and then we will come up and hang out in the highlands. And this is one of the areas that we utilize our super jeeps, and this is another one of our hiking days. So now is a good time for us to just talk about hikes in general. So all of the hikes that we're doing, whether it is on the glacier, on land, we've got a hike here, we've got hikes in the West Fjords, all of the walking that we do, the hikes are up to 3 miles, but some of them are quite a bit shorter than that. Some of them can be up to 3 miles. I would say the terrain isn't too difficult, but it is something that, having sure footing is a helpful thing. And if you don't, then those trekking poles are there. We do have lots of help available. I already mentioned that, but I really want to reiterate that we do have people who are there to help make those hiking possible. And we can also create different options. If perhaps you really want to come out and see the highlands, but maybe you're not wanting to do the full hike out to Alaska, which is the bottom right-hand picture there, but you'd like to do a part of it, we can make that happen. If you'd like to come out for the drive but actually skip the walk entirely, we can make that happen. So everything is optional. Make sure that you participate in the things that you want to and that you feel comfortable and ready to do, and then just chat with your expedition leader if you're ever unsure about if your physical capabilities are up to the type of hike that it is that we're going to do. Now, in the Highlands, we have multiple different options of what it is that we're going to do, because the weather in the Highlands does not always look like that beautiful blue sky in that bottom right-hand picture. We can have wicked winds, we can have wicked rains, but the nice thing about the Highlands, going out on our Super Jeeps with our Super Jeep drivers, is that they know the area so well, and it's allowed us to create several different options for what it is that we're going to see that day. So we have a plan A, a B, a C, a plan A.2. Like, there's so many different options for what we do, but either way, we're going to make sure that we explore all of the incredible things that the Highlands have to offer. Lots of really beautiful things to be seeing up there. The Highlands is also the time that we tend to see our Arctic foxes. And this is Iceland's only native land mammal. So as I said, the reindeer are introduced. There are some other land mammals that exist as well. Not very many, but all of those things have been introduced. You could think of things like, mice coming over on ships. The Arctic fox, they are the only ones that have come here by themselves. And likely this has happened when, ice age has occurred, and perhaps that fox was able to walk from Greenland on the ice all the way over to Iceland and then kind of inhabit the area here. So we do often see our foxes up in the Highlands, but I have seen them in drives on the East Fjords. I've seen them in drives in the West Fjords. So we're kind of always keeping an eye out for them. Our Arctic foxes can be completely brown, brown-gray in color. So you can see some of the grayish, brownish tinges. You can be completely that color. We can also have them much more white. And Iceland is quite a fascinating place, that because the entire island doesn't get covered in snow, we do maintain both of those color morphs year-round. So if you've ever been up to Churchill, we go up there, and if I'm seeing Arctic foxes in the summer, they are that gray-brown color, and in the winter, they all change to that white color. You want to blend into your environment. But in Iceland, because they have different types of environments in the wintertime, some that are staying in areas that don't really get a lot of snow will actually stay that gray-brown all year round, versus others that are in the areas where there's lots of snow will turn that white. Helps you camouflage. How else are you going to better make sure that you're staying hidden? Arctic foxes could probably also be an entire topic, so I'm going to move on from there, but they are obviously very cute. Lots of fun to see, and we certainly are looking out for them. After we've left the Highlands, we go down to this area with these geothermal boiling mud pots. And if you've got that picture of Iceland in your brain, the map of Iceland, especially with that mid-Atlantic ridge, that line kind of cutting through it, you'll note that sometimes we're hanging out right along that mid-Atlantic ridge, and other times, say when we're over in the East Fjords, the West Fjords, we're nowhere near it. It means that we come in and out of different geological features. So when we're in the Highlands, when we're in the East Fjords is one of the oldest areas of Iceland, East and West Fjords. That rock can be, 16 million-ish years old, depending on what you read, versus right in the center, we can have brand new rock being produced, again, as those two plates are tearing apart. And what we have here at our geothermal boiling mud pots is, again, all of that heat, that activity that is impacting on the land. Now, the boiling mud pots themselves, they can be very acidic, very hot. We do not go in them. These are not the areas where we go and get into a nature bath. That is after this, we go into Mivat, and you can go into the nature baths there. Nice, calming, relaxing experience. Here, we just kind of walk around. We can also get a lot of sulfur smells. When I see this picture, I can also smell this picture, but it is a really incredible landscape to be in. I sometimes equate being in the Highlands, it almost looks like you're on the moon, and they did practice the moon landing in the Highlands of Iceland. And then we come on this day, and it's very red and very kind of colorful, and I almost feel like I've gone from the moon over to Mars. Again, how much travel could we possibly do in this Iceland itinerary? A lot. See lots of different landscapes here. So we've got a visit to the geothermal boiling mud pots, and then we head into Mevat. Mevat is an area with a big lake, Lake Mevat, communities around it, and we go and hang out there. And one of the main experiences that we're seeing here, well, I guess two. One is the Mevat nature baths. We do get to have that relaxation time, and the other is our Icelandic horses. Icelandic horses, they're across the entire island. We will see them constantly. I swear my first, second trip going around, I almost had a mutiny on board because people wanted to stop and take photos of every Icelandic horse they saw. Made for a very slow drive. But we do know people want to take photos of them and to get to experience them. They are a unique breed of Icelandic horse. They have been genetically isolated for many, many, many years and specifically bred for certain traits. So they're very known for being very friendly. They are shorter than horses, but do not call them ponies. I know sometimes they might look like ponies, but if you say pony to an Icelander, they will not care for that. They are horses. They are shorter, stockier, but they're incredibly hardy. They're able to survive in these Icelandic winters. So been very specifically bred for that purpose. But the other thing that makes them very unique is that they have more gaits, more ways of walking than most horses. So these guys do have 5 gaits, and one of the gaits we can actually experience when we go horseback riding. So the horseback riding is just incredible because we get to go through these old volcanic eruption sites that are now covered in mosses and lichens, and it's absolutely stunning. And we'll go through some of these volcanic areas, but we'll also get a chance to experience, as I said, one of those gates, and it is called the Tolt. And so the Tolt is actually a very fast moving gate, but it's a very smooth ride. So they'll say how you can sit up on a horse and do the Tolt, in theory holding a cup of tea, a mug of beer, whatever it is that you want to hold on to, and it's so smooth that you will not spill your drink. Now, I will say this does take a particular skill in order to get the horses to listen to you to do it. But most people, most guests, even if you don't have experience on horses, you're able to we'll give you instructions and figure out how to do that Tolt. If you're not interested in doing the Tolt, you definitely don't have to, and we can have more of a casual ride. Both of those options are available. People come horseback riding who have never been on a horse before and absolutely love it. Or if you've got lots of experience being on a horse, this ride is certainly for you as well. Our horseback riding experience is so much fun, and not only just because the horses, but the landscape, as I said, is particularly beautiful there as well. All right, that's kind of towards our last things that we're doing. I always call it mainland. There's not a specific island that we're going to, but we've got that big main chunk of Iceland that we're driving across, and then we fly from Akureyri over to the West Fjords. And in the West Fjords, we're obviously in these fjords, so we go out and we're doing a whole bunch of things, but we're exploring this rugged landscape. And what I find really fascinating is we spend time in the East Fjords, and then we go spend time in the West Fjords. And at one point, those things would have been the center of Iceland, right? We know that it's splitting across like that. And so we'll see really similar features in the East Fjords and the West Fjords, those rocks, those layers that we'll see, and we'll talk about tons of geology. Even if you don't like geology, trust me, you will be thinking rocks are very neat by the end of this trip. And yeah, we'll explore all these rugged landscapes. You can see some of these ridiculous roads that go right along the coast onto these cliffs. So much to explore in the West Fjords. It's an absolutely stunning, stunning place. But it is also where we do one of our main wildlife viewing experiences, which is whale watching. Remember that boat and those cool outfits at the beginning? We do go out and we'll search for our whales. And the main animal that we're going out to see when we are out here is our humpback whales. So Iceland is super well known for their whale watching. They do whale watching in various parts of the country, but one of the incredible things about doing it in the West Fjords is that it is so private. The West Fjords is a very unexplored region of Iceland. Many people drive around and do the ring road and miss that little finger part up at the top, that claw that is the West Fjords. People don't even see the West Fjords, and I love it. I think it's one of the best places of Iceland. So we can come out here, we'll go whale watching, and most times, I would say 99 95 at least percent of the time we are out there. We are the only boat out there. Like there's no other fishing boat, there's no other any type of boat that's out there, and it's just us getting to explore into this fjord and go whale watching. And they do have a pretty stable population up there with lots of whales, and this will happen spring, summer, and into fall as well. So there's no need to worry about whale watching if you come in June versus coming in September. We will have whales that are there. Sometimes they're displaying nicely and they can be breaching out, they can be slapping tails and fins around. Sometimes we're just casually hanging out with them while they're coming up and their tail fluke comes in, they go down for a dive, then they come up and will, be close enough sometimes that you can hear them breathing and like their breath is basically coming over onto the boat. It's pretty incredible being able to see these humpback whales in such a personal way. People go whale watching in various other locations, but I've been to other places and there's so many boats around, and this one is just really unique and really special. And new this year, so it's important to differentiate here, we do have a summer itinerary and we have an autumn itinerary. And I'm so excited about this because we started doing our post-COVID, I've been doing the trips since post-COVID, but when I started doing some of the tours in September, we would be seeing all of the spectacular colors of Iceland, which you maybe don't think about because there's not a lot of trees, but we can, again, dive into that as a whole other topic. But our itineraries were not, we were just wanting to really capitalize on what makes those different times of year unique. And so for our summer itineraries, those are the birds. So if you're wanting to check out puffins, summer is definitely the time that you're wanting to come. We aren't going to be seeing puffins in our September itineraries really. So summertime is for our puffins. We do have a few locations that we have options of seeing them. We can see them day one. We've left Reykjavik and we can include them on that day sometimes. But our main puffin day that we would say is does occur in the West Fjords. So we have Vigur Island. It's an island that is actually known for eider down farming. And if you've got the word farming in there for eider ducks, farming there, it's just very different from the other types of farming that you might be thinking of. Eider down farming is having your wild eider ducks come and essentially treasuring them, because eider ducks naturally pull out their down to line their own nests, and then the ducks leave, and then the farmers are able to just go collect all that down, clean it, and do what they need to do with that eider down. So they treasure their eider ducks, and as a result, it creates a lot of safe haven space for many other animals, many other birds, one being the puffin. So Atlantic puffins, Iceland actually has about 60% of the world's Atlantic puffins, and it's estimated that somewhere between 8 to 10 million Atlantic puffins are on Iceland every single year. And what's really cool is we see these puffins and we see them in these big groups. You can have many different names for them, a circus of puffins I've even read, and we see them and we often think of puffins being quite social, but the only time they're in that group is when they are on land. So they come in the spring, they're breeding, they've got their burrows where their pufflings, their baby puffin is going to be, they're on land, and then as summer ends and we head into fall, the adults take off. Not long after that, the pufflings take off, and then they're out in the ocean for 8 months by themselves. And I imagine this kind of clownish bird being out there, essentially getting beat up by the ocean. They look very tiny, very sweet, but they are a very tough creature. I am of the opinion, if you can be unhappy looking at a puffin, I don't know. I don't know what's going on there, because puffins, you cannot not smile when you're looking at a puffin. So we'll hang out with puffins, but there are other birds. I talked about the eider ducks. We also have our Arctic terns, and if you've come on a trip with us, Arctic terns might really stand out in your memory. These guys will be in the same breeding colonies, areas of the puffins of our eider ducks, sorry. But these ones we will see and hear, and sometimes hopefully not feel. They can be very territorial of their breeding grounds, and as you walk through, they essentially don't like when anybody comes into their breeding grounds, and they will dive bomb you. So we move swiftly through the area just to get from one point to the other. You actually hold sticks above your head because they're going to go after the highest point, and that's how we'll stay safe. But again, we move through quickly, so we're doing minimal disturbance to our Arctic terns. Arctic terns, I think, are just absolutely incredible. They are here in the summer. They fly all the way down to Antarctica during what we would call our winter. They essentially follow the sun, because in wintertime up north, it's summertime down south, and we've got all that light there. So they're flying back and forth between the north and the south parts of our globe. It's a pretty impressive thing. They can fly about 40,000 miles each year, and people have actually calculated it based on their lifespan, could be about 30 years old, that they're essentially flying to the moon and back about 3 times throughout their lives. That's the distance that they're traveling. Or I've also read that they fly around Earth about 60 times. So an incredible, incredible bird. So our summer itineraries are a lot of fun for finding our birds, but I also really want to point out more about the beauty of the autumn itineraries. So here you can see a lot of these stunning, stunning colors, and we've modified our itinerary to spend more time, say, in Lake Mevat, because Lake Mevat region is remarkable for the autumn colors. The first time I drove through, seeing all of these autumn colors, I was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I could not stop looking around. I wanted to stop every 4 minutes to take photos. It is so, so, so beautiful. So we've modified the itinerary to really make sure that we're taking our time to go for walks and enjoy and explore the absolutely remarkable colors of the autumn itinerary. And the autumn itinerary, not only with our fall colors, but our daylight times have changed. So throughout our summer, when our first trip of the season, you're going to have almost 24-hour daylight, only dark a little bit in the evening. But as we head into late August and go into September, we do have our darkness return. And you might be wondering what Iceland is like for the aurora. So in our summertime, because we have that light opportunity, the light all the time, it isn't really our opportunity for seeing our northern lights, seeing the aurora borealis, versus as we move into September, we've got those dark periods return. Now, it is not an aurora itinerary, but of course, we want to make sure that we're showing you the aurora if we can. Some of the hotels will actually do an on-call. If not, the expedition leader does check and keep an eye on our aurora forecasts. And if we can do so, then we'll certainly bring you out for the aurora. And the nice thing is that most of the places that we are staying are in pretty dark areas. So you can walk. This is literally this is actually probably in one of our brighter areas. This is in the West Fjords where I took this photo. We walked for 5 minutes to get outside of town, and we're able to take this photo. But if we're, say, in the Highlands, you can walk, and I have stood out there, walk right outside the door and stand in front of my back touching our lodging, and you can be looking at the aurora. So there's certainly lots of options for it, but we do want to consider our sleep in here too. Of course, you guys can sleep however much or as little as you want, and watch the aurora. But yeah, we'll be making sure it doesn't change our days, because we still want to make sure we're enjoying and exploring all of the land experiences that we're seeing, as well as hopefully some solar experiences. So that one I would say is much more unique to the autumn itinerary. Okay, I'm almost done. I know we need time for questions. This is my last slide. I just want to talk a little bit about photo gear. Iceland, we do have our specific photography expeditions, and Eddie, who leads those trips, he's going to be doing a webinar on those ones and dive a lot more into photo specific things. That one that is occurring next Tuesday, I believe, the 18th. So if you have super questions about that, I would attend that one. But I'm still a photographer. I run other photo trips, and I do think it's important for people to understand some photo gear. So I myself, I do have 3 lenses that I tend to bring. Can be a bit excessive. You don't need to bring all of these ones. If you're hoping for wildlife, so if you're there in the summertime and you're really wanting to catch those birds, bringing a telephoto lens. So I have a 100 to 500, 100 to 400, whatever you've got is really great for that. The landscapes, of course, we're going to have more of our wide angle lens. A 14 to 24, I think is what mine is right now that I'm bringing around. And so I can do a lot of landscape shots. If you're wanting to do aurora, tripods are really helpful for that. We have, trying to remember if we have a couple of tripods, but I would say safe bet, maybe ask, I don't remember specifically about that one right now, but bringing a tripod if it's something that you're wanting to use. Most of the people on the itineraries, if they're super interested in it, bring their own tripod. So I would definitely recommend bringing your tripod. If you're wanting to do long exposure with our waterfalls, if you're wanting to take aurora photos, having your wide angle lens will be good for that. I also do have a 70 to 200 just for that kind of intermediate range. I bring binoculars, and your guide will have binoculars. If you're a really big bird nerd and want to spend a lot of time behind binoculars, I'd recommend bringing your own pair. If you just want to occasionally see, we're not very territorial about our binoculars, so we do tend to share ours and people can have a look. But if you want to make sure that you get maximum time with binoculars, then I would certainly remember to bring your own. And cell phones. Cell phones also do an incredible amount of photography. Some of the photos that are in this trip, or on this webinar, I took with a cell phone. So I certainly use my cell phone a lot for photography too. So that's kind of our photo needs. And that is where I'm going to end it off. And we'll hand it back over to Kendall, who I think will probably have some questions for me. But thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Lianne. That was fantastic. You answered so many of the questions that came in as you went along. Yeah. I do want to say we may go a few minutes over the top of the hour. So if you have to leave, just know that we did record this presentation and we'll get the replay out to you by around this time tomorrow. Okay. The question that just came in was about when the autumn itineraries start. I believe that's September. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know the exact start date, but it's typically our September departures. Yeah.
Great. And a question that came in about trekking poles. If someone isn't bringing their own, but they want to spend some time before or after the trip on their own, do you know if there's a place that those can be rented?
I don't know of any place that those can be rented. What I would recommend is get in touch with your adventure specialist, and they might be able to send a note out to our team. It is dependent on our stock because we've got multiple groups. So our trekking poles end up migrating around Iceland a lot with groups. So depending on the day when you land and what our stock is, they might have ones that they could have available for you. But get in touch with your adventure specialist, and it kind of sends a message out to the team to find out if that's possible, because they are a bit cumbersome to travel with. I certainly do know that. So yeah, ask your adventure specialist just to check the stock and whatnot and see if that we can make that happen. But I would guess that we would probably be able to make that happen. I don't want to promise it for sure though. But
okay, great. Another question that came in a few times actually was the restroom situation when you're on the drives. How long are the drives, and are you able to make restroom stops in between? What's the situation there?
yeah, a great point, and it's something that your expedition leader will make you feel very comfortable with. We have lots of bathroom stops available. So as we're driving around, we go and see so many of these sites, and Iceland has done a remarkable job because their tourism is just booming. They're wanting to make sure that their facilities can keep up with the demand. So we have bathroom breaks at a lot of places. So we make it our due diligence to say, all right, when we leave here, your next bathroom break will be in 2 hours. Your next bathroom break will be in 40 minutes, that kind of rough idea. You should go here because there's no lineups versus the next one. You might have more lineups. We're quite familiar with the bathroom availability, but they are readily available. So it's never really been a concern. Our longest stretches, I would say, without bathrooms occur on our glaciers. There are no bathrooms on top of the glacier, believe it or not. And then whale watching as well. But I've never had an issue. So it's always worked out well, and it's just a couple to a few hours. So, but we talk about it. We talk about liquid intake. We talk about bathrooms. So it's a topic that we discuss many times.
Okay, great. One question that came in a few times is about elevation or altitude. What's the max elevation for this trip?
Ooh, that's a great question. I don't think I actually know the answer to that. I would have to look into that. It's not my Iceland brain isn't in full gear up here right now. But it's not like if you're worried about elevation, altitude sickness or anything, it's not high enough for that. A lot of it, we are at sea level. When we get up to the highlands, we go up, but it's not enough that it would cause any level of like altitude sickness if you're thinking that. So that's not even something that we discuss on the trip. I talk about it in our Canadian Rockies trip. I point that way because that's where they are. Those Canadian Rockies just over there. But we don't talk about it in the Iceland trip, so it's kind of a non-issue. But I don't remember what the max elevation is that we get to.
Okay, I think that answers the question though. Someone is asking about packing for their trip because they're doing our Greenland trip first, and then they're doing
Nice.
Iceland next. Do the packing lists kind of correlate? Is there an overlap?
Yeah, I would say that the packing lists certainly overlap a lot because you're going to want layers, you're going to want waterproofs, windproofs, all of that kind of stuff. I think Greenland is a little bit more specific on their weight requirements just because of the flights specifically that they are taking. And so, yeah, I have not packed for the Greenland trips, but there should be significant, if not complete, overlap on those. So many people do pair them, and they just have the bag that they're bringing on for both of them. So if you do end up bringing some extra stuff, or if you're a big souvenir shopper, we use the same hotel, so you can most likely store things at the hotel. If you finished Iceland and you're like, man, I have a whole other bag of things, then you can probably store it at the hotel in Reykjavik that we use for the Greenland ones too.
Mhm. A few people are asking about laundry facilities.
Mm, Laundry is a big one. Because we're moving so much on our trips, it typically means that we're getting to a hotel kind of, 7 p.m., 6, 7 p.m. In the evening, and then we're leaving in the morning. So laundry is not something that is very readily available. And I don't recommend that people kind of count on that. There are I think in the West Fjords they can offer it, but that's right towards the end of the trip. So what some people will do, another European style within the bathrooms, is they often have the heated towel racks. So I've used it for drying purposes. Even sometimes some of the floors are actually heated. So if my clothes do get wet throughout the day, I can put them on the towel drying rack. I've laid them out on the floor and they'll dry. So I've always managed to get everything dry. And if I need to wash a few things in the sink and then hang them up, kind of the same thing. But typically, I just try to recommend that people have with them what they need. Typically things like underwear, people are needing to make sure they've got the right number to bring with you because laundry not so available.
Mhm. We've got several people asking about midges and if they're going to be a problem.
Another great question. Yeah, so the main time that we experience this is Lake Mevat. Mevat actually translates to midge, so it's essentially Midge Lake. And the midges are absolutely crucial for the bird life. It also has an abundant amount of bird life, but midges go through a life cycle of like a kind of a late spring kind of boom, and then they go away for a little bit, and then they come back again in August, and then they go away for a little bit, and the dates shift year to year depending on the weather, what's gone on, how warm it's gotten, how early. So I can't tell you when exactly they are going to be. But midges, they do a thing. They certainly do a thing. They don't bite. They're not harmful to you. The most thing that they do is annoy you. They do like to get very personal with your eyeballs. And so what we do, sorry, my cat's coming back in. What we do is we do have bug nets for our faces. So we supply those, so you do not need to bring one. And we can use them. It's mainly in Mevat that we'll use them, but we bring them around with us. If we're going around and doing our walks in Mevat, we can wear them. And horseback riding is another big spot. It's typically the only place that they're there, but don't worry, we all manage through it.
I'll just do a couple more questions because I know we're running late here. A couple people are wondering about the luggage weight requirements, and I know we can absolutely have people refer to their PDBs or get in contact with someone at the office. But just really quickly, is the published weight listed for like the big main flights still okay for the smaller charter flight?
Um, I would definitely check in the PDB because the smaller domestic flights, they can kind of have a bit different of requirements. I find particularly with my carry-on. That said, I've never had an issue and I'm a large carry-on person. I have like a Pelican case for all of my gear, and sometimes they're like, I don't know if that's gonna fit. And I'm like, it fits, and you just kind of push it in a little bit. I've always made it work and they'll help out. But if you've got like really giant carry-ons, that can be a big factor. And but with the luggage that is stored like under the plane, they can have different requirements. So I would double check them. I don't have those numbers offhand in my brain. Sorry.
That's okay. And hard-sided suitcases, are they okay, or should people stick to soft-sided?
That one is up to you as well. I've brought both around and I have successfully done, again, considering the size, because you don't want to have this massive hard-sided case. But if you do have a smaller one, sometimes those can be easier just to transport around. So yeah, that one I think is more preference. But it's not an absolute requirement. But just please don't bring massive ones. Makes storing of them very, very difficult. Transporting them with us becomes a challenge. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to call it there for questions since we're past the top of the hour. If anyone still had a question that didn't get answered today, please do get in contact with the folks at our office. The folks in concierge, if you're booked, can certainly help you. If you're not booked yet, call in and speak to the adventure specialist, and they're going to be happy to help answer any questions you may have. All right, Leanne, thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back over to you for closing comments.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully it did answer most of your questions as we said, but yeah, I love the itinerary. I'm so pumped that we've got a separate autumn itinerary that we've developed this year. It's ones that I'll be doing, but the summer itinerary is also incredible. So maybe you'll just have to go to Iceland twice. Who knows? It is, so it's lots of fun. So please do join us. Iceland's an incredible place with amazing people. Yeah, it's such a fantastic trip. So I'm looking forward to getting back out there and hopefully see some of you there.
Yep, you've inspired me. I can't wait to get back myself. It looks incredible. Thank you so much again, Leanne. This was a wonderful presentation. And my thanks to everyone who tuned in. Join us next week for our next daily dose of nature. I'm going to have next week's lineup, including registration links on our website at nathap.com/webinars later this afternoon. And of course, keep an eye out for our Sunday e-news announcement. We did record today's presentation and we'll have the replay available on our website soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.